Chapter 11, Section 2, 6, Gray Chalk Marl. This deposit constitutes the foundation of the chalk hills, its outcrop forming a fillet or zone round their base and connecting the detached parts of the range with each other. The texture of the marl is commonly soft and friable, but indurated blocks occur, which possess the hardness of limestone. It is of a light gray color, inclining to brown, and frequently possesses a ferruginous tinge derived from oxide of iron. It principally consists of carbonate of lime and alumine, with an intermixture of silica, a very small proportion of iron, and perhaps of oxide of manganese. Where denuded, the surface of this deposit composes a fertile tract of arable land, including some of the best farms in the county. In the range of low cliffs near Eastbourne, the grey marl is seen rising from beneath the chalk, and reposing on the grey sand, with which it is intermingled at the line of junction. Its separation from the superincumbent bed of chalk without flints is well defined, and may be traced with but little difficulty. From this spot it extends with scarcely any interruption to Shoreham River, its outcrop being interposed between the foot of the downs and the bassetting edge of the blue marl. In western Sussex it occupies the same relative position, the lower chalk passing insensibly into the grey marl, and the latter into the Malm rock. In its course through this tract of country, it forms a few hillocks or mounds of low elevation, which are remarkable only for the abundance and variety of their fossil remains. I shall proceed to notice a few of the more interesting localities. A low bank at Middleham, in the parish of Ringmer, near the seat of the Reverend J. Constable, contains Hamites, Turrelites, Notchlites, Ammonites, and Inocerami. The largest Turrelite hitherto discovered was collected near this spot, and is figured in Mineral Conchology, Tablet 74. Stoneham, near Lewes. From a marl bank in a field adjoining the turnpike gate, I have collected the same kinds of fossils as at Middleham. Also, Rostellariae, Auriculae, Scaphites, etc. Hamsey Marl Pits. The hillock, of which these pits present a vertical section, is insulated by the river Ouse. The quarries are situated on the north side of the church, and are about 25 feet high. The strata are slightly inclined, and vary from a few inches to a foot or more in thickness. The indurated layers are separated by intervening seams of a soft, loose marl of a dark color. The face of the rock is traversed by innumerable crevices, which in some instances are parallel with the stratification, and in others assume a vertical or transverse direction. The lowermost strata are of a bluish-gray color, indicating a transition to the blue marl, into which the grey marl passes at the depth of a few yards. These quarries contain sulphuret of iron and spicular crystals of carbonate of lime. The former often composes the constituent substance of the fossils. The latter occurs in groups, lining the fissures and cavities in the marl. The organic remains found in these pits are very numerous and present considerable interest. They consist of several species of ammonites, notchli, turrelites, scaphites, hamites, the teeth and vertebrae of sharks, the supposed fur cones of Cherry Hinton, etc. Offham Pit, This excavation lies on the roadside between Offham and Cooksbridge. It produces ammonites, notuli, turrilites, scaphites, etc. Clayton, near Hurstpurpoint. A marl pit at this place has afforded to the researches of Mr. Weeks turrilites, hamites, ammonites, scaphites, etc. In other localities of the Marl, the fossils are less abundant than in those above enumerated, and the turrilites, hamites, and scaphites but very rarely occur. On the surface, a narrow belt of this deposit appears to encircle Lewes levels, separating the latter from the edge of the chalk hills. Since this want of continuity, however, does not extend beneath the surface, the marl is invariably found upon sinking through the alluvial clay, of which the levels are composed. Protrusions of the marl through the clay occur in some situations, and these form islands when the levels are inundated, a circumstance that, previously to the improved state of the navigation of the Ouse, was of very frequent occurrence. The principal elevations of this kind are the two extended ridges called the Rees, which have been already described. These, in all probability, owe their form to the action of eddies, or opposing currents. Minerals. The mineralogical productions of the grey marl are few and offer but little variety. They consist of various modifications of sulphuret of iron and crystallized carbonate of lime. 1. Crystallized carbonate of lime. This mineral is frequently semi-diaphanous, varying in color from a lightish gray to a gallstone yellow. It occurs in inconsiderable veins, and occasionally in groups of crystals, lining the cavities of the marl. The usual form of the crystal is that of an acute rhomboid. Of this kind, some interesting specimens have lately been discovered at Hamsey. 2. Sulphuret of iron, or sulphuret of iron, or iron pyrites. This substance, from the decomposition of its surface, is generally of a yellowish rusty brown color externally. It occurs in a variety of irregular, fantastic shapes, and oftentimes bears the impression of organic bodies, forming casts of terebraculae, pectenites, madreporites, and the inner volutions of scaphites. Small spherical masses with an elongated stem, their surface beset with obscure pyramidal crystals, and exposing a brilliant radiated structure internally, are not uncommon. One specimen in my possession contains within a cavity small crystals of sulfate of lime. Crystals of pyrites terminating in the quadrangular pyramid of an octohedron and disposed in irregular groups are often embedded in the casts of ammonites and other fossil remains, and the marl pits at Hamsey contain masses of this mineral bearing the form of a species of escara, somewhat resembling E. foliacea. 3. Oxide of iron, in the state of a reddish-brown powder, is frequent in cavities of the marl, and has probably been produced by the decomposition of iron pyrites. The greater part of the marl fossils have acquired a ferruginous color from this mineral. 4. Clay slate. The occurrence of this substance in the marl is clearly accidental, having been derived from some regular bed of argillaceous slate of anterior formation to the chalk marl. The only examples hitherto discovered were embedded in the marl at Sutherham Corner. The largest is about 2 inches square, and nearly half an inch thick. The edges are sharp, and the specimen appears to have suffered but little from attrition. Organic remains. The grey chalk marl in its course through Sussex is well characterized by its organic remains, which differ both in their nature and in the mode of their preservation, from those either of the superincumbent bed of lower chalk, or of the blue marl upon which it reposes. Numerous species of ammonites, notuli, and inocerami are the most common productions of the pits near Lewes, which also contain turrilites, scaphites, hamites, etc. These remains of testacea very rarely exhibit any vestige of their original shelly covering, but consist of casts of indurated argillaceous limestone, of an ochraceous or a ferruginous color, more or less distorted by compression. 1. Wood. The existence of fossil wood in the chalk formation has been much questioned by some geologists, but the fact is indisputable, as numerous examples in my collection satisfactorily prove. It is of a dark brown color inclining to black, and when first collected, very distinctly exhibits its ligneous structure. It is exceedingly friable, and falls into a carbonaceous powder upon exposure to the air. The specimens found at Hamsey seldom exceed a few inches either in length or breadth. They are of a compressed cylindrical form, and appear to be the remains of branches or stems of small trees. Locality Hamsey. Two. Aments or cones of unknown vegetables. Tablet 9. Figures 4, 5, 7, 8, 11. Woodard's Catalogue, Part 2, page 22, 672. 3 cones seeming to be of the larynx. Organic Remains, Volume 1, Plate 6, Figures 16, 17. These are the supposed fossil Julie of the larch, for which the chalk pits of Cherry Hinton have been so long celebrated. Since the time of Woodard, these bodies have excited considerable attention, and yet their nature is still involved in obscurity. In fact, their appearance is so equivocal that some naturalists have been induced to consider them as the remains of animals, rather than of vegetables. Dr. Parsons thought they bore a greater resemblance to the roots of a plant than to the parts of fructification. A.B. Lambert, Esquire, V.P.L.S., to whom I showed a very perfect specimen, was immediately struck with its affinity to the cone of a species of Pinus. Mr. Parkinson supposes that the appearance of these fossils certainly supports the idea of their having been either aments or cones of some tree not now known, at least to the European botanist, whilst, on the other hand, the situation in which they occur renders this supposition highly problematical. Instead of being associated with other fossil vegetables, or in matrices which have originated in the decomposition of vegetable matter, they have only been found in chalk, which has proceeded chiefly from aqueous deposition, and in part from the decomposition of animal, but certainly not of vegetable matter. Professor Hailstone informs us that 2 perfect specimens in the Woodwardian collection place their vegetable origin beyond all doubt, and in corroboration of this opinion, mentions that in the quarry at Cherry Hinton he had discovered the impression of a branch of some vegetable of the fir tribe, with the linear leaves surrounding it. On the other hand, Mr. Koenig of the British Museum, who did me the favour to examine several Hamsey specimens, remarks that these bodies, although possessing a distant resemblance to the Julie of the larch, in all probability do not belong to the vegetable kingdom, for when exposed to the action of muriatic acid, they emit the peculiar smell which is so strikingly manifested in dissolving the madreporitic remains of fetid limestone, the putrid exhalation being almost intolerable. As these fossils occur in an excellent state of preservation in the Marl pits at Hamsey, I had indulged the hope of being able to discover a specimen that might illustrate their origin and point out their real nature. But although, by the kind assistance of my brother, more than 50 of these bodies have been submitted to my examination, I can add but little to what is already known concerning them. The remains in question are of a reddish-brown color, from 0.5 inch to 2 inches long, of a cylindrical form, and gently tapering towards the apex, which is obtuse. They are more or less compressed, and have a scaly, corrugated surface. Their constituent substance is precisely of the same nature as that of the vertebrae and other bones found in the chalk formation. Some examples have scales of fishes attached to them. In structure, they differ most essentially from any strobulus or cone, for instead of an imbricated surface, formed by scales containing seed, and proceeding from one common axis, as in the Julie of the larch, their scaly appearance is produced by the undulating margin of the substance of which they are composed, the latter being irregularly coiled in a spiral manner, round an oval cavity or receptacle. This appearance is very obvious in Tablet 9, Figure 4, in which the marl is seen projecting through the interstices of the volutions. At the base of Figure 5, the termination of the last coil is distinctly exhibited. Figure 7 is the longitudinal section of a fragment with the cavity or receptacle filled with marl. In some specimens this is wanting, the fossil being solid throughout. Figure 8 is one of the most perfect examples that has been found in Sussex. The base is thicker and of a darker color than the body of the fossil, and has much the appearance of a calyx. In another specimen, a depression in the center of the base resembles the attachment of a stem. Figure 11 is remarkably large, but has suffered considerably from compression. Locality, Hamsey. 3. Linear markings, the impressions of leaves, from Hamsey. These resemble the chalk specimens delineated in Tablet 9, Figures 2-12, and have been supposed to be the foliage of a species of larch, of which the aments or cones, above described, were the fruit. This opinion is, however, problematical. Zoophytes. The zoophytes of the chalk marl are neither numerous nor important. They consist for the most part of fragments of unknown genera, in which the characters of the original are too imperfectly developed to allow of accurate determination. A few of the more perfect specimens are here enumerated. 4. Small turbinated bodies, having a pedicle, the surface covered with circular pores or cells, irregularly disposed. These bear some analogy to the compound porpital madreporite, but their openings do not appear to possess a stellar structure. Their constituent substance is an earthy oxide of iron. Localities: Hamsey marl pits, Stoneham, etc. 5. Allianonium piriformis. A piriform body composed of argillaceous limestone about 2 inches long, the surface presenting a spongeous appearance. Resembling in form the alcyonitic flints figured by Mr. Parkinson, Organic Remains, Volume 2, Tablet 9, Figures 4, 6, 12. This fossil may be referred to the genus Alcyonium. With less hesitation than many of the mineralized zoophytes, to which that name is usually applied. Localities: Hamsey, Southbourne, near Beachy Head. 6. A cylindrical Ramos zoophyte, about 0.4 inches in diameter. Branches short, distinct, decussetedly opposite, terminations obtuse, with a central depression. The only specimen hitherto discovered possesses the structure here described, but more perfect examples are necessary to determine its characters. It approaches in some respects to Alcyonium mammillosum and A. ocellatum of Ellis. Localities: a marl bank near Malling Gate. 7. Millipora. Tablet 15, Figure 10. A Ramos subcylindrical zoophyte. Branches distinct, opposite. Terminations truncated, bilobed, with rounded entire margins, the centers oblong and depressed. Cells irregularly rhomboidal, arranged in parallel rows. The cells are but imperfectly shown, and it is scarcely possible to determine their original form with any degree of accuracy. Locality: Marl Bank at Stoneham, near the Reverend J. Constable's Middleham. 8. Millipora gilberti. Foliaceous, flexuous, terminating in projections with oblong openings, each having an obtuse spinous process. Surface covered with minute circular pores, irregularly disposed. A very elegant milliporite, composed of crystallized carbonate of lime, not unfrequent in the localities hereafter mentioned. The short spinous projection, which proceeds from the margin of the terminations, appears to constitute its specific character. I have named this species in honor of Davies Gilbert, Esquire, MP, VPRS, etc., of Eastbourne, a gentleman universally respected for his public talents, and beloved for the suavity of his manners and the excellence of his private character. Localities: in the cliff near Sotherham. And Beachy Head. 9. A flexuous zoophyte, occurring in masses of an oval form, from 2 to 5 inches in length. These fossils bear some affinity to the preceding, but those in my possession do not exhibit any traces of pores or cells. They have been supposed to belong to the genus Spongia, but more illustrative examples are required to establish the conjecture. Their constituent substance is calcareous spar. Localities: in the beds of marl that form a junction with the grey sand at Southbourne. 10. Portions of a foliaceous zoophyte, allied to the genus Flustra, the surface covered with small, ovate, symmetrical openings, disposed in meshes. Localities: Storum, Middleham. Echinites. The echinites of the grey marl have their characters but imperfectly defined, and are extricated from the surrounding matrix with great difficulty. Their crustaceous coverings are invariably converted into a brittle crystallized carbonate of lime, and their cavities filled with marl. They are generally distorted by compression. 11. Sidaris. Tablet 17, Figure 1. Circular, depressed, with 10 porous circular, depressed with 10 porous ambulacra, and as many areae. The surface is covered with 20 rows of small, elegant, perforated papillae, set on tubercular projections, the margins of which are crenulated. This fossil appears to be a variety of Echinosidaris saxatilis. Localities: Hamsey, Offham. 12. Echinospatagus cordiformis of Bryn, an oblong cordiform echinite, exceedingly common in the chalk, but of rare occurrence in the marl. Localities: Hamsey, Middleham, Eastbourne. 13. Echinospatagus radiatus. Organic Remains, Volume 3, Tablet 3, Figures 4 and 5. An ovate galliated echinite, very closely allied to the species referred to. Localities: Hamsey, Middleham. 14. Echinital spines. Slender, muricated spines, the Cucumerinae of Parkson, are occasionally found at Hamsey, and I have one specimen of a palisado spine from the same place, which possesses a spathos structure. Estaceae. Univalves. 15. Voluta ambigua. Tablet 18, Figure 8. Although the specimen here figured is merely a cast of the venter, or lower volution of the shell, its characters are sufficiently obvious to identify it with V. ambigua of the London clay. It is attached to a portion of Ammonites varians. Locality: Middleham. 16. Buckingham. Tablet 18, Figure 13. The cast of the last wreath of a ventricose univalve belonging to this genus is the only example that has come under my notice. Locality: Hamsey. 17. Rostellaria parkinsoni. Tablet 18, Figures 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 10. Subfusiform, wreaths 7 or 8, convex, with longitudinal ribs and numerous transverse striae. Outer lip dilated, armed with one styloid process, beneath which is a broad truncated expansion. This species occurs in the green sand of Devonshire, and is figured in the 3rd volume of Organic Remains, Plate 5, Figure 11. As it has not received a specific appellation, I have named it after my excellent friend James Parkinson, Esquire, M.G.S., etc., of Hoxton Square, the learned author of The Organic Remains of a Former World. The specimens figured, although differing from each other in certain particulars, are evidently casts of the same species, the differences observable arising partly from compression and from the markings of the original shell being more strongly impressed in some examples than in others. In figures 1 and 5, which are different views of the same specimen, the reeds are nearly smooth, with the exception of a few imperfect coats. With the exception of a few imperfect costae. Figures 2 and 4 are nearly flat from compression and the ribs almost effaced, but the surface is covered with transverse striae. The collection of the Geological Society contains a large specimen of this kind. Figure 6, a cast of 5 reeds, including the venter, but the outer lip and base of the columella are not preserved. In this example, the upper volutions are smooth. The 2 lowermost exhibit the ribs and striae. Figure 10 represents a cast of the dorsum, or back of the shell, but the base of the largest wreath is unfortunately destroyed. In this specimen, the ribs and striae, with the styloid process of the outer lip, are well defined. Localities: Hamsey, Middleham, Southbourne, Ranscombe. 18. Trochus. Tablet 18, Figure 7. The outline of this delicate cast resembles that of Trochus agglutinans of Brander. Locality: Hamsey. 19. Trochus. Tablet 18, Figure 9. Discoidal, base slightly convex, the margin acutely angular, aperture. The base of the shell delineated in the figure is the only portion I have seen. The angular margin is a remarkable character by which the species may be readily identified. Locality: Hamsey. 20. Trochus linearis. Tablet 18, Figure 17. Conical, wreaths slightly convex, transversely striated, with a prominent line along the center and base of each volution. Base flat. Umbilicus obscured by the last volution. Aperture transversely depressed. In Figure 17, the linear markings by which this species is distinguished are but obscurely shown, but in a specimen subsequently discovered and which contains a portion of the original shell, these characters are strongly marked. Localities: Hamsey, Middleham. 21. Trochus. Tablet 18, Figure 16. The cast of a species of Trochus of an oval form, probably of T. linearis, distorted by compression. Locality: Hamsey, Middleham. 22. Auricula incrassata. Tablet 19, Figures 2, 3, 34. Ovate, ventricose, transversely sulcated, sulci longitudinally striated. Spire short, columella triplicated, outer lip thick, with a broad, transversely striated border. The 3 folds on the columella, the striated sulci, and the broad band on the margin of the external lip are the distinguishing marks of this beautiful shell. It is a small species consisting of about 3 volutions and seldom exceeds half an inch in length by 0.3 inches in width. The spire is short, the outer lip thick. The broad, striated band gives a peculiar feature to the back of the shell. The striae which cross the delicate grooves or sulci are so minute as scarcely to be visible to the naked eye. When viewed with a lens, they appear elevated and sharp, dividing the furrows into minute rectangular cells. This species occurs silicified in the Blackdown whetstone pits of Devonshire, and is described by Mr. Parkson. Mr. Sowerby mentions that it resembles a ringitans of Lamarck, but the want of striae within the outer lip and the presence of longitudinal striae upon the surface distinguish the British shell. Figure 2 is an elegant specimen, in which the shell is replaced by a thin pellicle of reddish-brown sulphuret of iron upon a cast of indurated marl. It shows the plicated folds of the columella and the broad band of the outer lip. Figure 3, a smooth cast, in which the spire is more produced than usual. Figure 34, a large specimen exhibiting the back of the shell. Tablet 18, Figure 3, is a distorted cast that bears a closer affinity to Auricula simulata of Sowerby. Mineral conchology, Tablet 163, Figures 5, 8, than to the present species. Localities: Hamsey, Middleham, Stoneham, Offham. 23. Ampullaria, Tablet 18, Figure 11. The cast of a subglobose ventricose univalve, probably belonging to the genus Ampullaria. The depressions of the spire and the oblique form of the cast originate from compression. Locality: Hamsey. 24. Vermicularia umbonata, Tablet 18, Figure 24. Discoidal, spire depressed, concave beneath, umbonated above, the outer volution produced and marked with distant annular ridges. This species is commonly about 0.7 inches in diameter and consists of 2 or 3 volutions. It is slightly concave or umbiculated on its interior surface, the inner whorls of the upper sides being concealed by an umbo. The produced part frequently exceeds in length the longest diameter of the shell, and is marked with sharp annular ridges. Where these occur, the substance of the shell is much thickened, the cavity of the tube being diminished nearly 1/3. The aperture is simple and round. Figure 24. This example shows the depressed spire with its central obtuse knob and a considerable portion of the produced part of the external volution. In every specimen of this fossil, the shell, hardened by an impregnation of calcareous spar, still remains. Locality: Hamsey. 25. Vermicularia Sowerby, Tablet 18, Figures 14, 15. Conical, spiral, smooth, umbiculate, inner wreaths ankylosed, slightly inserted. Aperture indented by the preceding volution. Outer whorl not produced. This species differs from V. umbonata in having the spire elevated and the whorls inserted. The outer volution is not produced in any specimens yet discovered. The line of separation between the wreaths is obscured by an extension of the substance of the shell, by which the volutions are ankylosed, or cemented together. The specific name is in honor of James Sowerby, Esquire, FLS, etc., whose in-depth whose indefatigable exertions have very materially contributed to the elucidation of the natural history of the British Islands. Locality, Hamsey Marl Pits. 26. Serpula. A small group of serpulae has been discovered at Hamsey by Mrs. Mantell. The shell is smooth and very tortuous, bearing some analogy to S. glomerata, but is probably a distinct species. (27) Nautilus elegans. Tablet 20, Figure 1, Tablet 21, Figures 1, 4, 8. Subglobose, umbiculate, transversely sulcated, sulci numerous, linear, curved, reflexed, volutions 1/3 inserted, septa concavo-convex, entire, siphunculus central, aperture obtusely sagittate. The thickness of this nautilus is equal to twice its width. The sulci are transverse and very numerous, dividing the surface into broad, flat costae. These form an elegant curve on the back of the shell, and proceeding laterally, are reflected towards the umbiculus. The septa are gently undulated, and have their convex surface placed in an opposite direction to that of the sulci, which they decussate. The siphunculus is large and nearly central, and the umbiculus very small. In a young state, the sulci are wide and separated by sharp, transverse ribs, the whole surface being marked by numerous longitudinal striae. Casts of this species are common in the grey marl of Sussex and Wiltshire, but no vestiges of the shell itself have been observed. The specimens are frequently oblique from compression, and seldom exhibit the curved sulci in perfection. They are from 1 to 12 inches in diameter. Tablet 20, Figure 1 is a remarkably fine cast of an adult shell, in which the sulci with the broad and flat costae, the situation of the siphunculus, and the form of the septa or descipiments are well preserved. It was discovered in a marl bank at Middleham in the winter of 1814. The following are casts of the young shell. Tablet 21, Figure 1. Nearly smooth, the spire oblique, and much compressed. Tablet 21, Figure 4. In this example, a few linear sulci and the markings of the septa are the only indications of the species. Tablet 21, Figure 8. This very elegant and perfect cast is from Middleham. It is deeply channeled by the broad transverse sulci, and is an excellent example of the characters of the young shell. The small, smooth notuli, so frequently met with in various localities of the marl, are imperfect specimens of N. elegans in a young state. In a few instances, the septa are composed of sulphuret of iron, and the chambers lined with crystals of carbonate of lime. Localities: Hamsey, Stoneham, Offham, Middleham, Ranscombe, Firle, etc. (28) Ammonites Mantelli of Sowerby. Tablet 29, Figure 9. Tablet 22, Figure 1. Discoidal subumbilicate, volutions subrotund, costate 1/3 inserted, costae tubercular, transverse, alternately annular, with from 2 to 8 rows of tubercles, ambit flattish with 2 rows of marginal tubercles, septa very sinuous, siphunculus external. The number and disposition of the ribs and tubercles of this species are so various that although it is one of the most abundant productions of the gray marl, its specific characters are not easily defined. The general form of the shell is discoidal, the volutions, which when perfect are nearly cylindrical, being flattened by compression, as in the specimens figured by Mr. Sowerby. The inner reeds, in those which are compressed, are nearly 2/3 concealed, but in more perfect examples are less deeply inserted. The costae are round and extend alternately across the whorls, the intermediate ones embracing about 2/3 of the volutions. The tubercles constitute the following varieties. Var costata, with 2 rows of tubercles, tablet. Var costata, with 2 rows of tubercles, tablet 21, figure 9. 2 tubercles are placed on every rib and form a row on each margin of the ambit, or back of the shell. Var tuberculo costata, with 6 rows of tubercles. This variety, in addition to the marginal tubercles, has 4 rows, which are placed on the longer costae only, each side of the shell having one set on the margin of the umbiculus and another at a short distance above it. Var tuberculata, with 8 rows of tubercles. The 2 additional sets which distinguish this variety are placed one on each side, midway between the margin of the ambit and the second row of tubercles from the umbiculus. These intermediate tubercles occur on every rib, each of the larger costae being ornamented with 8, while on the shorter ones have but 4. From the numerous tubercular projections on this variety, the outer volution is somewhat pentagonal. The septa of A. mantelli are numerous and very foliaceous. The form of the aperture varies in different specimens, but its width is in general equal to about 2/5 of the diameter of the shell. The siphunculus is small and extends along the center of the ambit. This species frequently attains a large size, some specimens exceeding 1.5 feet in diameter, but in these the tubercles are almost obliterated. Tablet 21, figure 9, a beautiful cast from Middleham of the first variety. Tablet 22, figure 1. This specimen also belongs to Var costata. It exhibits the foliaceous septa and the situation of the siphunculus. It was collected by my friend Thomas Woolgar, Esquire of Lewes. Localities: in almost every spot in Sussex where an excavation has been made in the grey marl. 29. Ammonites sussexiensis. Tablet 20, figure 2. Tablet 21, figure 10. Discoidal, subumbilicate, volutions subquadrangular, inserted, costated. Costae transverse, numerous, with 7 rows of tubercles, one of which extends along the center of the ambit. Septa foliaceous. Siphunculus. This species is nearly allied to the preceding, but is distinguished by the ribs in almost every instance, reaching entirely across the volutions, and by the central row of tubercles on the ambit. The sides are flattish, the external margin somewhat angular, the ribs prominent, in most instances entirely embracing the volutions, but in some varieties being alternately short, as in A. mantelli. They are studded with 7 sets of tubercles, arranged in the following manner, namely, a row on the inner and outer margins, with 2 intermediate ones on each side, and a dorsal row along the ambit. The aperture is nearly quadrangular, and the septa foliaceous. The situation of the siphunculus is unknown. In the adult shell, the ribs are prominent and somewhat angular, the dorsum broad and flat, and the central row of tubercles almost obliterated. This beautiful species varies from a few inches to a foot in diameter, and was formerly abundant at Hamsey, but is now seldom found. Tablet 20, Figure 2, represents a specimen of the size and form in which this species most usually occurs. Tablet 21, Figure 10, a perspective view of a small specimen. Localities: Hamsey, Offham, Middleham, Sotherham, Rodmill, Plumpton. 30. Ammonites varians. Tablet 21, Figure 2, 5, 7. Discoidal, subumbiculate, volutions depressed, half inserted, transversely radiated, radii bifurcate, undulated, studded with from 4 to 6 rows of tubercles, septa very foliaceous, carene acute, entire, aperture sagittate, siphunculus external. This species of ammonite is one of the most proteoform of the whole genus, presenting great variety in the figure, disposition, and number of the tubercles and costae. It is, however, readily distinguished from its associates by the acute entire keel and the bifurcating tubercular radii. It is from 0.2 inch to nearly 6 inches in diameter, and is frequently compressed into an elliptical and sometimes into a cordiform shape. The volutions seldom exceed 4 in number, and are rather more than half inserted. The umbiculus is shallow and expanded, its sides smooth, and crested with a row of small tubercles, from which the radii arise. The latter proceed obliquely over 1/4 of the volutions, where they form another set of tubercles, from whence they diverge into 2 branches, each terminating in a tubercle on the outer margin. The carene is smooth and forms a prominent acute keel, having a row of opposite tubercles placed on each margin. In a suite of 50 specimens, in which every individual presented some peculiarity, 3 principal varieties were observable, each passing insensibly into the other. Var subplana. Tablet 21, Figure 2. The volutions depressed, radii linear, inner row of tubercles obscure, external margin crenated, keel but slightly elevated, aperture sagittate. Some specimens of this variety are nearly smooth, and the keel so much compressed that without the aid of numerous examples, their relation to the tubercular variety could not have been ascertained. Var intermedia. Tablet 21, Figures 7, 8. In this variety the volutions are rather depressed, the radii broad and well defined, the tubercles small and distinct, the external margin tuberculated, the keel prominent, and the aperture sagittate. This is the usual form of the species, and holds an intermediate rank between the smooth and tubercular varieties. Var tuberculata. Mineral conchology. Tablet. Var tuberculata. Mineral conchology. Tablet 176. Figures 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Volutions subrotund. Radiations short, thick, nodular. Tubercles elongated, very prominent. Keel acute, aperture roundish. A very beautiful variety, distinguished by its projecting tubercles, of which Mr. Sowerby's Figure 1 affords an excellent example. The inner rows of tubercles are almost effaced, but the marginal and intermediate sets are strongly relieved, and in some examples become spinous. From the thickness of the volutions, the aperture is obovate. Localities, very abundant at Hamsey, Middleham, Stoneham, etc. 31. Ammonites cinctus. Dicoidal, subumbiculate, volutions depressed, half inserted, transversely radiated, radii annular, distant, bifurcate, undulated, umbilicus expanded, sides smooth, with a marginal row of oblique tubercles, ambit convex, embraced by the radii, aperture ovato-sagittate. The volutions, although compressed, have a slight degree of convexity, and are ornamented by transverse radiations that arise from a row of small tubercles on the inner margin. Each radius divides into 2 branches, which pass with a gentle sweep across the ambit, and unite with the corresponding undulations of the opposite side. Small oblique tubercles are placed on each radius at the point of bifurcation. The volutions are 3 in number, the inner ones being 3/4 concealed. The dorsum, or ambit, is gently undulated by the radii. But one specimen has been discovered, the dimensions of which are as follows. Longest diameter 3.8 inches, width of the outer volution 2/5 of the diameter, transverse diameter of the aperture 1.1 inch. It is scarcely necessary to remark that although this species approaches to A. varians in having bifurcating radiations and a row of tubercles on the inner margin, yet it is widely separated from it by the rounded form of the back, and other obvious differences. Locality, Middleham. 32. Ammonites falcatus. Tablet 21, figure 6-12. Depressed, subumbiculate, volutions deeply inserted, transversely radiated, radii plicated, falciform, extending down the sides of the umbiculus, umbiculus small, with crenulated edges, dorsum flat, narrow, with a longitudinal sulcus, margin plicated, aperture sagittate, siphunculus. This rare and elegant species is almost flat, the longest diameter exceeding its greatest thickness, nearly 4/5. The volutions are slightly enlarged in the center, but are contracted at the ambit into a narrow flat keel, with a sulcus down the middle and delicate plicated edges. The radii are very slender at their origin in the umbiculus, but gradually increase in breadth, and passing obliquely to the center of the volutions, make a sudden curve towards the margin, where they terminate in obtuse folds. The form of the septa and the situation of the siphunculus are unknown. The shape of the radii is so remarkable that the species may be readily identified. Tablet 21, figure 6, the only perfect cast hitherto discovered, from Middleham. Tablet 21, figure 12, a fragment from Stoneham, exhibiting the flat sulcated ambit. Localities, Middleham, Stoneham.